I never thought a poodle named Kevin would completely derail my Tuesday. But that's what happened. I was running late for a job interview, coffee in one hand, portfolio in the other, nerves rattling like dice in a cup, when I saw him curled up by a lamppost, leash still attached, looking absolutely defeated. Kevin, not me. I looked defeated too, but his eyes had that sad, Shakespearean kind of drama. He had no collar, no tags. Just a blue leash looped around a fire hydrant like someone had parked him temporarily and then just forgot. I looked around. No one in sight. I bent down. Hey, buddy. You lost. He blinked once. Then did the unthinkable. He scooted closer and licked my shoe. This is how I knew I was doomed. Because now I cared. Now I was involved. I had exactly 22 minutes to get across town to an interview I was already mentally underqualified for, and now I had custody of an abandoned dog with strong opinions about where he sat, on my feet. I tried asking the nearest shop if they'd seen someone with a poodle. The barista said that dog's been there since like 9, and went back to foaming oat milk. 9. It was nearly 11. I couldn't just leave him, but also interview. I called the number listed on the streetlight pole for lost pets, but it rang and rang and rang. No voicemail. Just eternal ringing, like a broken doorbell. Kevin, clearly over the drama, started walking. He led. I followed. That's how I found myself speed walking down 14th Street, holding a latte, a resume folder, and the leash of a poodle who had just decided to adopt me. I figured maybe I could find a vet, or a shelter, or anyone who could take him while I did the adulting thing. But with time ticking and no help in sight, a horrifying thought struck me. What if I brought him to the interview? I laughed out loud, then stopped laughing, then realized there was no other option. So I did what any rational, desperate person would do. I tied Kevin's leash into a neat bow around my wrist, wiped dog hair off my blazer, and walked confidently into the high-rise lobby like I wasn't about to bluff my way through an interview with a poodle. The receptionist looked up. I smiled. She looked at Kevin. Kevin sneezed. He's my therapy dog? I said, voice going up an octave on the question mark. She blinked, typed something, and said, "You're early." That's great. Early. Miracles existed. Kevin and I sat in the waiting area. He curled at my feet like he belonged there. I adjusted my resume folder, ignored the growing sense of dread, and told myself, you can do this. Just don't let him bark. Then the elevator dinged, and everything got 1,000 times weirder. The elevator doors parted with a smooth ding, and a man in a navy suit stepped out, all polished confidence and magazine at jawline. He had the kind of presence that made you instantly self-aware of your posture. Alex, he asked, extending a hand. I jumped up, nearly fumbling my resume folder and the leash simultaneously. Yes, that's me. Hi. I shook his hand, mentally willing Kevin to behave. Kevin, as if understanding the stakes, calmly stood and wagged his tail with subtle poise. And this must be, the man's eyes flicked down to Kevin. I swallowed. Kevin. He's my therapy dog. It felt like the lie physically passed through my bloodstream. The man smiled. Great. We're pet-friendly here. Come on up. I followed him through an open layout office full of exposed brick and lightwood, where every employee looked like they did yoga before breakfast. Kevin padded silently at my side, the very model of professional canine restraint. We passed a juice bar, a hammock, an indoor plant wall taller than my apartment. I tried not to let my jaw drop. We believe in creating calm, creative spaces. The man, Tom, he said his name was, told me. People do their best work when they feel like they can breathe. You know. Absolutely, I said, trying not to trip over Kevin. I'm all about breathing. He led us into a glass-walled conference room where 2 other people, both in smart casual chic, were waiting. This is Megan and Jules, Tom said. They lead the creative strategy team. Megan waved. Jules leaned down to pet Kevin. And this handsome guy is Kevin, I said again, smiling like it was the most natural thing in the world to bring a poodle into a job interview. He's here to keep me sane. Megan laughed. Well, he's already making us happy. The tension in my chest started to ease. We all took our seats, Kevin curled under the table like a dog who had done this before. Tom opened a laptop. Let's get started. Tell us a little about yourself and what drew you to this position. I launched into my rehearsed spiel, adrenaline and caffeine coursing through me. Work history, background, why I love their company. I managed a joke about brainstorming with dogs that actually landed. They laughed. Kevin yawned in perfect timing. The energy shifted. I could feel it. I was in the zone. Then, Tom leaned forward with a grin. You know, we've actually been discussing ideas for a campaign centered around pet-friendly work culture. Would you be interested in helping shape that? Definitely, I said, heart racing. It's something I believe in. Deeply. Awesome, Jules added. Kevin really completes the picture. I smiled. Every cell in my body now depended on Kevin not doing anything weird. No barks. No chewing. No peeing. Just Kevin being Kevin. The rest of the interview went surprisingly well. They asked smart questions. I gave decent answers. Kevin even rested his chin on Megan's foot halfway through, earning himself cooing and a casual head scratch. When we wrapped, they stood to shake hands. Tom said, "Thanks for coming in, Alex. We'll be in touch soon. And bring Kevin again, he's kind of the office mascot now." I mumbled something grateful and totally normal, walked Kevin back through the glass palace and out into the city sunlight. I exhaled so hard I nearly deflated. Kevin trotted beside me, looking proud. And then, on a lamppost, I saw it. A missing pet flyer. Kevin's face. On it. In a little raincoat. Above it, the words, "Lost, miniature poodle. Answers to Kevin. If found, please call Alex." My legs stopped working. My brain tried to reboot. I blinked again. Same photo. Same name. Same number I had called that morning. The name? Alex. But not me. The real Alex. And just like that, the leash in my hand became evidence in a case I never meant to be involved in. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, the kind of frozen where your legs still work, but your brain has stopped accepting new information. Kevin, meanwhile, tugged slightly at the leash to investigate a passing leaf, his tiny pink tongue hanging out like he was on vacation. I couldn't move. Not because of him, but because of what I was holding. The flyer. On a weathered piece of neon green paper was Kevin's face, same curly fur, same ridiculous look of noble confusion. Above his head, in big black marker, "Lost dog, answers to Kevin." Beneath that, "If found, please call Alex." And that's where my grip on reality started to slip. Alex. My name. Except, clearly, not mine. Someone named Alex had lost Kevin. And I, also named Alex, but not the right Alex, had found him, claimed him as a therapy dog, taken him to a job interview, and inadvertently launched us both into minor office celebrity status. I checked the number on the flyer. It was the same one I'd called that morning. No voicemail. Just endless ringing. At the time, I thought maybe it was outdated. But now I knew the truth. I'd called the real Alex. They just hadn't picked up. Kevin looked up at me, tail wagging gently, blissfully unaware that the entire house of cards we'd built together was about to collapse. I took a photo of the flyer and walked home with him, each step heavier than the last. I didn't know what I was going to do. Confess to the company? Ghost the job? Write an apology letter to Kevin? I got back to my apartment, let him in, and watched him immediately make himself at home. He wandered to the window, peered out thoughtfully, then circled my rug twice before flopping down like he'd always lived there. I stared at him. "You're not even worried about this, are you?" He blinked. I sighed and pulled out my phone again. I stared at the number, thumb hovering. Then I called. It rang once. Twice. Then again, and again, and again. Still nothing. No voicemail. Just the long, lonely buzz of a line that refused to answer. I hung up and tossed my phone on the couch. I was stuck in the weirdest ethical dilemma of my life. Return the dog and probably ruin my job chances, or keep the dog and live in a sitcom-level lie. But I already knew what I had to do. It was Kevin's leash I was holding, not my future. Around 11:30 that night, my phone finally rang. I didn't even check the caller ID. I just grabbed it like it was air. "Hello?" A tired, slightly raspy voice answered. "Hi, is this the person who found Kevin?" "Yes." I nearly yelled. "Yes, I've got him. He's fine. He's here with me and well, he's been sleeping for most of the day, honestly." "Oh, thank God," the voice said. "I've been calling shelters all afternoon. I didn't think I'd ever get him back." "I'm glad I called again," I said, trying not to sound like I'd spent the whole day making pasta while pretending to own someone else's dog. "When can I come get him?" the voice, real Alex, asked. "Tomorrow morning?" I suggested. "There's a little park bench near where I found him. I can meet you there around 9? "Perfect. Thank you so much." Seriously. I was a wreck all day. We hung up. I stared at Kevin. "Well," I said, "looks like we have one last sleepover." He blinked again. No reaction. I spent the night in a weird limbo of relief and dread. On one hand, Kevin was going home. On the other, I had to say goodbye to the dog who had gotten me a job I didn't deserve. Yet, morning came too fast. I barely slept, thinking about everything that had happened in just 24 hours. The job interview. Kevin's unexpected rise to office mascot. The missing poster. And now, the end of our short-lived partnership. I'd given Kevin a solid brushing and a farewell scrambled egg. He refused to eat it unless I hand-fed it to him. Diva behavior, honestly, but I didn't have the heart to deny him. We arrived at the park 10 minutes early. Kevin trotted along like he owned the city, nose twitching at every passerby. I saw them before they saw us, a person pacing near the bench, phone in hand, looking hopeful and exhausted all at once. Real Alex. They looked exactly like the kind of person who says, "He's my child, not my pet," and means it. "Kevin," they called out, dropping to their knees. Kevin froze. Looked. Then, without hesitation, bolted. Not away, but toward them. Tail wagging, ears bouncing, full-speed reunion. He leapt into their arms like a tiny, curly cannonball. I stood there, holding the now redundant leash. "Thank you," Real Alex said, eyes glassy. "You have no idea how much this means." "Of course," I said, managing a small smile. "He's great. We went through a lot together." They laughed. "Jules told me someone brought a poodle named Kevin to an interview yesterday." I didn't think. "Yeah," I said, scratching the back of my neck. "About that." But before I could explain, my phone buzzed. New email. The subject line made my heart do a somersault. "Welcome to the team." I stared at it, stunned. Kevin had gotten me a job, but I didn't have Kevin anymore. And now I had to figure out how to walk into work tomorrow without the very coworker they thought they hired me with. I stared at the email like it was written in another language. "Welcome to the team." It felt surreal. They really did it. Despite the bizarre, dog-assisted interview, they'd hired me. I wanted to celebrate. I wanted to be excited. But instead, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff made of dog hair and white lies. Real Alex was now walking away, Kevin bouncing beside them like none of this had ever happened. Just yesterday, he was curled up at my feet under a glass table, helping me charm an entire creative team. Now he was back where he belonged. And I? I was left with a job I'd gotten through. Well, let's call it circumstantial teamwork. I walked home slower than usual, the city buzzing around me like nothing strange had happened. But inside, I was spiraling. How was I supposed to walk into that office on Monday without Kevin? What if he was the only reason I got the job? What if they asked about his diet, his favorite dog park, or worse, what if they expected him to have an employee badge? I called Carmen. She picked up on the first ring. "Did you get the job?" "Yes." "Congrats. So when do you start?" "Monday." And I'm already panicking. I explained everything, the reunion, the email, the terrifying expectation that I might now be seen as a permanent emotional support dog having human. "Okay," she said slowly. "Then we borrow Kevin." "What?" "Just for the first week. Ease them into the idea that he's not always there." "Carmen, you can't just borrow someone's dog. You borrowed him for an interview." "Accidentally." "You're telling me Real Alex wouldn't lend him for a day or two if it meant his unofficial co-owner keeps a steady income?" She had a point. A morally questionable, slightly manipulative point, but a point nonetheless. That night, I sent a text. "Hey, this is weird, but the company loved Kevin. Any chance he could visit for my first day? Totally understand if not." I hit send, not knowing if I was insane or inspired. The reply came faster than I expected. Less than 5 minutes later, a text lit up my screen. "Honestly, that would be hilarious. Kevin's calendar is wide open. What time should I drop him off?" I stared at the message, stunned, then exhaled so hard I startled a pigeon outside my window. Kevin was in. For one more day, at least. Carmen's theory of temporary emotional support animal leasing wasn't just plausible, it was happening. Monday morning arrived with an odd mix of excitement and guilt. I'd laid out my clothes the night before, packed my bag, and even prepped a little note for Real Alex. "Thank you again. Kevin's the real MVP." At 8:15, they arrived with Kevin in a tiny harness that looked custom-made by someone who once styled royalty. "Be good, okay," Real Alex said to him, kneeling like a coach before a big game. Kevin blinked once and then trotted inside with me like we were picking up exactly where we left off. As soon as we entered the office lobby, the receptionist lit up. "Kevin's back." Kevin wagged his tail like he knew the performance had begun. On the elevator ride up, I checked myself in the mirrored wall. I looked like a professional. Kevin looked like a professional's accessory. We were a team again, albeit temporarily. As the elevator doors opened, Jules caught sight of us and actually clapped. "He came back. You really weren't kidding." "Nope," I said, smiling like I had any idea how long I could keep this up. The day went smoother than I expected. Kevin slept next to my desk. People dropped by just to see him. I answered onboarding questions while scratching his ears. Someone from HR asked if I'd be okay doing a little write-up about how pets affect productivity. By lunch, I had a badge. Kevin didn't, but someone printed him one as a joke and laminated it. Everything felt oddly normal. Except I knew it wasn't. Because at 4:30, Real Alex texted. "How's he doing? Want me to swing by around 5? And I realized I was about to hand over a coworker who had higher approval ratings than me. By 4:45, I was completely unprepared to let Kevin go again. He'd been an absolute gem all day, quiet, cuddly, just enough curiosity to charm without chaos. People loved him. My supervisor joked that Kevin had better office etiquette than most interns. Even the head of HR, who looked like the kind of person who alphabetized their spice rack, bent down and whispered, "He can come anytime." But now, with Kevin's shift about to end, I felt that pit in my stomach returning. This wasn't just about a dog anymore. It was about the role he'd accidentally played in creating a version of me I wasn't sure I could live up to without him. At 4:57, I got the text, "Outside." I stood, smoothed my shirt, and leaned down to attach Kevin's leash. He gave me a soft grunt but didn't resist. Of course he didn't. He was a poodle, not a liar with an emotional dependency on accidental success. We rode the elevator down together in silence. When the doors opened, there was real Alex, leaning casually against the lobby wall, scrolling through their phone. They looked up and smiled. "Hey, buddy," they said as Kevin patted forward, tail wagging politely. "You guys had a good day?" they asked me. "Yeah," I said. "He's amazing. Honestly, I think half the office would take a pay cut if he joined full-time." They laughed. "He's got range." We chatted briefly, just enough to make the handoff feel natural. Then I watched as they clipped Kevin back into his fancy harness and headed toward the door. Right before they left, real Alex turned back. "If you ever need him again, just for a visit, just ask," they said. "He likes the attention, and you clearly keep him out of trouble." I blinked. "You'd let me borrow him again?" "Sure," they said, shrugging. "He likes you." Then they were gone, Kevin trotting off into the city evening like some kind of celebrity heading home from set. And I stood there, realizing that while I had come to this place for a job, what I'd found might be something way more complicated than a paycheck. The next morning felt different. The buzz from my first official day was replaced with the cold realization that I'd be walking into the office solo. No leash, no furry sidekick, no villain icebreaker. Just me, trying to live up to the version of myself that people met when I was, quite literally, accompanied by a celebrity dog. I arrived 10 minutes early, trying to set the tone. The receptionist gave me a polite smile, but no Kevin, this time. Jules waved from across the hall but didn't get up. Even my supervisor just gave me a quick nod and pointed to my desk. Normal. Totally fine. Everything was fine. But I felt like half a double act. The day crawled. I tried to stay focused, checking onboarding documents, skimming campaign briefs, nodding thoughtfully in meetings even when my brain was spiraling. The HR guy passed me in the hallway and asked, "Kevin taking a personal day?" I laughed politely, then hid in the break room for 15 minutes pretending to look for tea. Without Kevin, I didn't know how to be charming. Or at least, I didn't feel charming. People still smiled at me, but they didn't linger. Conversations were shorter. I wasn't the guy with the adorable dog. I was just the new hire in slacks who once made everyone laugh, and now barely made eye contact. At lunch, I ate alone. My sandwich tasted like cardboard. Every now and then, someone would ask how Kevin was, and I'd answer with vague, upbeat tones, "He's great. Resting up. You know, spa day." By 3 p.m., I was convinced I'd blown it. That I'd peaked during the interview. That I was just a temporary blip of personality, carried in by a poodle and now deflating in real time. Then, just as I was staring blankly at an onboarding tutorial, a notification popped up. Company-wide Slack channel. "Tomorrow, bring your pet to work. Again, day. Kevin inspired us. Let's make it a thing." I blinked. Read it twice. Jules had posted it. And people were reacting with emojis. Heart eyes, paws, claps. Kevin wasn't just remembered. He had become a movement. And now I had less than 24 hours to get him back, again. It turns out there's no chill way to ask, "Hey, can I borrow your dog for a fake holiday my new office created based on a misunderstanding?" But I tried anyway. I texted real Alex that evening, opting for casual honesty wrapped in mild desperation. "So, funny story. My office is now doing a bring your pet to work, again, day tomorrow because Kevin made that big of an impression. Would you be open to letting him come back for one more shift?" I stared at the message, thumb hovering. Then hit send. Seconds passed. Minutes. I just started drafting a follow-up apology when the reply came in. "He's already packed his tiny bag. Just tell me what time." Relief washed over me so fast I almost sat down on my kitchen floor. Kevin was coming back. The sequel. And this time, he'd be the star of a full-blown office event. I showed up early the next morning, pacing in the lobby like a dad waiting outside a delivery room. At 8:45, the elevator dinged, and there they were, real Alex holding Kevin, who was now wearing a small bandana that read Chief Vibes Officer. "Well," I said. "You weren't kidding about the bag." He insisted, they said with a grin. "Don't forget his water bowl." He gets snobby about hydration. I laughed, clipped on the leash, and promised I'd return him in pristine condition. Kevin and I entered the office like we were walking a red carpet. Cheers broke out, not loud, but genuine. Someone from accounting held out a handmade sign that read, "Welcome back, Kevin," with cartoon paw prints. It was adorable and a little intimidating. Throughout the day, dogs of every breed and size appeared: golden retrievers, French bulldogs, a surprisingly elegant iguana on a leash. But Kevin? Kevin was the icon. He strutted from cubicle to cubicle like a politician working the room. He posed for selfies. He accepted belly rubs with royal modesty. HR even brought in a photo booth with paw-themed props. It was weird and beautiful. And in the middle of it, I felt something I hadn't felt since the interview: confident. Like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't riding his coattails, I was walking alongside them. But near the end of the day, as the crowd thinned and dogs dozed in corners, my supervisor approached. "Hey," he said, "we're working on a social campaign about workplace culture. We'd love a video series with you and Kevin. Maybe a weekly post? Real-life insights from the world's chillest office dog." I smiled, then panicked. Because Kevin wasn't mine. My supervisor walked off, totally unaware that he'd just handed me a gift-wrapped ethical crisis. A video series? Weekly content? Featuring me and a dog that, technically, I had no claim to? I sat at my desk, Kevin curled at my feet like he wasn't about to launch me into identity theft territory. I glanced down at him. "What do I do, man?" He yawned. "Helpful." I knew I had to come clean. Eventually. Maybe I could slowly ease them into the truth. Start with, "Kevin doesn't live with me," then later move on to, "Also, he's not mine." But before I could craft my confession plan, Jules dropped by with a latte and a little dog biscuit. "For the star," she said, handing me both. "He's going to be great in these videos," she added. "You guys have amazing chemistry." "Thanks," I replied, heart pounding. "He's full of surprises." That part was true. I made it through the rest of the day in a fog. Kevin charmed. I smiled. People asked when the first episode would drop. I nodded like I had a production team. At 5 p.m., Real Alex arrived. They walked into the lobby holding a tote bag that read, "Dog hair, don't care," and waved. "Did he behave?" "Like royalty," I said, handing over the leash. Kevin did a dramatic stretch, then patted over without hesitation. As they clipped him in, I hesitated. I wanted to say something. Ask. Admit. Instead, I just said, "Hey, quick question. Would you be okay with Kevin appearing in some company social media stuff? Like, small video clips. Nothing major." Real Alex tilted their head. "He's camera ready. As long as you're okay sharing credits." Yeah, I said. I just didn't want to overstep. They smiled. "You're doing the opposite. You're making my dog famous." I laughed awkwardly. "He kind of already is." We said goodbye, and they left. But I stood there in the lobby, staring at my reflection in the elevator doors. This whole ridiculous journey had started as an accident. But now it was something else. Kevin wasn't just a borrowed dog. He was a borrowed identity, a borrowed confidence. And I couldn't keep borrowing forever. I had to figure out who I was in this story. Because sooner or later, someone was going to ask the question I couldn't dodge. Who exactly is Alex? The next morning, I woke up early, sat on my couch in pajama pants in deep thought, and drafted a note titled Truth Confession Plan. It had bullet points, backup options, and even a section labeled How to Handle Tears, Mine. I knew I had to come clean to the team, to my supervisor, maybe even to Kevin. The lie wasn't huge, not by evil genius standards, but it was sticky. A name confusion that snowballed into a workplace persona I now couldn't separate from myself. I stared at the email draft I'd started the night before. It read, "Hi. Just a small clarification about Kevin, then nothing." The blinking cursor mocked me. How do you write an email that basically says, "Hey, the emotional support dog you all love isn't mine"? I sort of borrowed him, but accidentally, and also on purpose. At 8:52 a.m., just before I could delete the draft, Jules pinged me on Slack. "We're filming a test run with you and Kevin today around 2. Hope that still works." I stared at the message, then at the leash still hanging by my door like a trophy. I had two choices: backpedal now and risk looking like a fraud, or lean in just a little longer. I texted Real Alex. "Hey, any chance Kevin is free today for a quick cameo?" "Totally fine if not, of course." Seconds later, "He's already in the car. You owe him a puppuccino." By 9:30, Kevin was back under my desk. By 10 o'clock, someone had placed a small camera tripod near my chair. By noon, I was sweating through my shirt while pretending I had any idea how to be a video personality. At 2 o'clock sharp, we filmed. They asked me about workplace calm. about productivity, about finding balance. I answered in sound bites while petting Kevin like a stress ball in a fur coat. He rested his head on my lap and blinked up at me like he'd known all along I was in over my head. After the final take, Jules leaned over. That was great. You've got a weird charm, you know that. Thanks, I said. I think. As we packed up, Tom, the boss from my interview, walked by. Kevin's a natural, he said. Then added with a wink, so's his handler. I smiled, nodded, and walked away before anyone could ask me to fill out a pet ownership form. But something inside me was shifting. The lie was wearing thin. I was starting to wonder if I could keep this up, pretending to be the guy who walked in with a dog and accidentally became someone worth listening to. Sooner or later, something had to give. And I had a feeling it was coming sooner. The next day started like any other. But inside, I was a full-blown tornado and business casual. I'd reached my limit. The guilt, the absurdity, the feeling that I was starring in a sitcom without a script, it was all too much. I couldn't keep walking into work pretending that Kevin was mine, that I was calm and cool and collected when, really, I was clinging to the leash of a life I borrowed by accident. At 10 a.m., after yet another Slack message from someone asking for Kevin's availability for a quick cuddle break, I knew it was time. I pinged Jules. Hey, can we chat privately for a sec? We met in a quiet corner of the office. She smiled as I approached. Everything okay? And that's when I blurted out the entire story. The flyer. The wrong Alex. The borrowed poodle. The whole ridiculous, tangled saga, down to the puppuccino bribes and laminated fake badge. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she laughed. Not a polite laugh. A full body, eyes watering, I cannot believe this is real kind of laugh. Wait, she said between giggles. You accidentally impersonated a dog owner and then landed a job because of it? Yes, I muttered. And I'm really sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. She wiped her eyes. Oh, I'm not mad. I mean, you should have told us, sure. But come on. That's the most creative pitch we've ever seen, intentional or not. So, I'm not fired. Fired, she snorted. You branded us with a poodle. We're ordering mugs with Kevin's face next week. I stared at her. But, she added, maybe from now on, just lead with the truth. You're actually pretty great without the dog. That hit me harder than I expected. It was the kind of thing you think you need a mascot to hear. But maybe you don't. Later that afternoon, I texted Real Alex and told them everything. They responded with a string of laughing emojis and one final line. So when's Kevin's first official employee review? That weekend, I picked up Kevin one last time, not as a prop, not as a secret, but as a friend. We walked to the office, 2 names, 1 ridiculous story, and 0 secrets. And that's how I accidentally got a job, briefly impersonated a pet owner, and ended up co-hosting a viral series with a poodle who, to this day, still gets more likes than I do.